ship to the boys that millions remember. Let's the one that echoed through some of the greatest nights in boxing history, because when we think of HBO boxing, we just hear you. So fights, for example, Gatti Ward, that trilogy. Let's start with that one. What did it bring to you, that one? What it's like to call those fights? What it's like to feel them in real time?
The greatest comment, particularly about Gatti Ward 1, because this comment is simple and it's difficult to surpass it in terms of the impact of what we were watching. And that's Emmanuel Stewart. Oh my God!
I remember that.
For a man with his background, his experience, his knowledge of boxing, his depth in the sport, to be uncontrollably excited and moved by what he was seeing, to the point that he would say, "Oh my God," at least once and maybe 2 or 3 times. That I can't top that. And he was my closest male friend ever in life. I still think about him every day, and that's one of the things I most treasure about Gatti Ward. I tried in my way to talk about and articulate what Arturo and Mickey were doing all 3 times, but nothing tops "Oh my God" for our what it was.
Well, it's just kind of like a natural reaction
then,
to what's happening.
We get to Barrera Morales, and Barrera Morales is very much the same thing. And I know that you guys you've surely heard my increasingly well-known quote about this, but it's worth repeating. When you watch 2 fighters go beyond the limit of human understanding of what people can give and take in that situation, when they blow your minds with the level of intensity and combat and commitment and emotional determination that it takes to fight that way, and you see those fights, you can't be anything other than awestruck and blown away by it. And when you watch those 2 fighters fall into each other's arms after the bell that ends round 12, instinctively falling into each other's arms, you are not just looking at some ceremonial response. You're looking at real love, because now they know each other at least as well as their mothers do. They know everything about the opponent's weakness, his strength, how much he can take, how much he can give, what passion he has brought to the sport and its preparation. They know that about each other, and they've tasted each other's sweat. They've tasted each other's blood. They've taken each other's to the limits of their human endurance for pain and commitment and suffering, et cetera, et cetera. And only they know what it really was. Only they, in their face-to-face relationship, can share what it was. So after one fight and onward, Arturo and Mickey, soul brothers, very difficult to separate. We thought that it was frostier, more fractious between Barrera and Morales. But I was with them at Canastota last year. Same thing as Arturo and Mickey. Couldn't separate them. Went to every event together, ate every meal together, basically arm in arm. Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera. You remember those fights? It doesn't seem logical. But fighters fall in love with each other because they share an experience that's so extreme, so deep, and so emotional that only they know.
Yeah,
that's part of the beauty of the sport.
I remember one story with Max Schmeling and Joe Louis, years after their fights, and how they got to reunite. And
Schmeling paid for Lewis's funeral.
And Schmeling paid for Lewis's funeral. That's one of my early memories of reading about the sport, right? So,
and the contrarian part of that, Schmeling won the first fight, knocked Lewis out, but the beating that Lewis delivers in the first round of the second fight is one of the most intensely clinical, savage, devoted beatdowns ever in the ring. A colossal wipeout that, you worried that there would be a permanent effect on Schmeling. What was the permanent effect on Schmeling? He fell in love with Joe Louis and helped to take care of him in his later years.
Yeah, and again, one thing that I do want to say, Jim, we both, me and Chacal, are in San Diego, right? Where you used to live in Del Mar, right?
I did. I was Canelo Alvarez's neighbor.
Yeah. So both of us are Tijuana natives, right? So you can imagine back then that we were rooting for Morales, right? We were he was our boy.
Sure.
And
it was Tijuana. Absolutely.
Yeah, and even though there was like some sort of connection with Barrera being Mexican and being here from the Olympic Forum and LA, being one of the guys that was there, and it was a civil war, right? For us.
Does a real Mexican come from Mexico City, or does a real Mexican come from Tijuana?
Exactly.
That was absolutely part of that rivalry. And and by the way, they're both brilliant, smart guys. But I remember telling Marco Antonio in the days when we'd go to fighter meetings with him and talk to him and stuff like that. And I said, Marco, you are so smart. You have such an intensely high mind. You could be an attorney. What is Marco Antonio Barrera now? He's an attorney. So he listened to me. He did the work. He fulfilled that expectation.
Well, that's good.
And Eric, of course, successful promoter, major public figure to this day. For sure. And again,
politician
I had
too.
the privilege of having lunch with them in Canastota last year when they were buddy. You couldn't separate them.
Well, you go ahead, Chacal.
No, as you were saying that about the rivalry between Morales and Barrera, what is that stood you most on that first fight? Was it the hatred, the pride, or just the beauty of their violence?
Well, it was, I still remember this day, and I ought to go back sometime and check. But I remember that I thought that Barrera had won the fight, and I thought it was a bad decision in Morales' favor. Over the years, ultimately, various others, including Emmanuel, have said to me, you can't say that about a fight that close, all right? The real reality is, okay, judges had to pick a winner, but did somebody really win that fight? Or did they both fight at a sustained equal level for 12 rounds and show all the things that they could do? I lean toward the second interpretation. And of course, Marco won the third fights. So at the end of the day, I think it's fairer now, looking back, that Morales did get that first decision victory because Marco won the other two.
For sure. Now, do you think, how does it stand versus, the all-time trilogies in your eyes, like Ali Frazier, Gatti, where do you stack them? How do
I stack what?
How does it, the trilogy compare?
Well, nothing in my life, nothing in my career, nothing certainly relative to boxing has ever affected me as much as Cassius Clay / Muhammad Ali. Mm-hmm. I'm textbook. I'm like everybody else in my generational position. I'm born in 1949, 3 months after George Foreman. And that puts me in the Ali generation. I saw him at the Rome Olympics in 1960 when he was seeking a gold medal in the middleweight division. I read about how he had a playful habit of kind of taunting the white establishment in interviews, and I read some stories about his upbringing and how he was the early professional career. I watched all the early stuff. Still don't know if he actually won the Doug Jones fight. That was really close and a hard fight to score. But again, the first prize fight ticket that I ever bought, $100, lawn mowing and car washing money in Miami, was February 25, 1964 in Miami Beach. And I, to this day, I feel enormously privileged that I was there. And I also feel a little bit stupid, although it wasn't as much a habit at that time, that I didn't keep the ticket and eventually sell it for, $100,000 or something like that. But it was enough that I was there and that I can remember being in the audience.